Ambassador Theros's carefully arranged marriage of 20 years shattered the moment human soldier Roger Murphy set foot on Xindi soil. The Xindi female, her scales shimmering under the harsh light of Xindus's twin suns, stood at attention as the Earth delegation's shuttle touched down. Her husband, Zelek, a high-ranking military officer, sneered openly at the arriving humans. For 25 years, an uneasy peace had held between Earth and Xindus following a brutal interstellar war. This military exchange program represented the latest attempt to bridge the gap between their species. Theros knew the stakes were high. A single misstep could reignite hostilities and plunge both worlds back into conflict. As the shuttle's doors hissed open, Sergeant Roger Murphy emerged. At 35, the decorated Space Marine cut an imposing figure. His muscular frame, honed by years in Earth's stronger gravity, dwarfed the slender Xindi. Theros felt her breath catch as she took in his confident stride and piercing gaze. Murphy approached, extending a hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Ambassador Theros, I presume. Sergeant Roger Murphy, Earth Space Marines. Thank you for welcoming us to your world." Theros hesitated before grasping his hand. The warmth of his skin sent an unexpected jolt through her. "Welcome to Xindus, Sergeant. We hope your stay will further strengthen the bonds between our peoples." Zelek stepped forward, practically shoving Theros aside. "Let's not waste time with pleasantries. You humans are here to train, not socialize. I suggest we begin with a demonstration of your capabilities." Murphy's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained level. "Of course, what did you have in mind?" "A simple combat exercise, unless you're not up to the challenge?" Zelek's mandibles clicked in what passed for a Xindi smirk. Before Theros could intervene, Murphy nodded. "Lead the way." The assembled crowd moved to a nearby training area. Theros watched, heart racing, as Zelek and Murphy circled each other. Her husband struck first, his movements blindingly fast to Xindi eyes, but Murphy was faster. In a blur of motion, the human soldier dodged Zelek's attack and countered with a swift series of strikes. Zelek crumpled to the ground, unconscious. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. Theros stared at Murphy, a mix of fear and fascination coursing through her. This human had just effortlessly defeated one of Xindus's top warriors. What other surprises did Earth soldiers hold? As medical staff rushed to attend to Zelek, Theros made a split-second decision. "Sergeant Murphy, perhaps you'd allow me to give you a personal tour of our capital? It would be an excellent opportunity to discuss our shared history and future cooperation." Murphy's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he nodded. "I'd be honored, Ambassador." As they walked away from the stunned crowd, Theros knew she was stepping onto a dangerous path. Her actions would have far-reaching consequences for her marriage, her career, and the fragile peace between their species. Yet she couldn't deny the pull she felt towards this human soldier. In that moment, 20 years of political marriage seemed to crumble in the face of newfound possibility. As they walked away from the training area, Theros felt her hearts racing. The human's display of strength and agility had left her both impressed and unsettled. She led Murphy through the winding streets of the Xindi capital, her scales shimmering under the harsh light of the twin suns. "Our city has stood for millennia," Theros explained, gesturing to the towering spires of crystalline architecture. "Each building tells a story of our people's." A sudden commotion erupted from a nearby plaza. A group of Xindi, their scales painted with anti-human slogans, surged towards them. "Murderers! Invaders!" they chanted, brandishing makeshift weapons. Murphy's posture instantly changed. He stepped in front of Theros, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Ambassador, stay behind me," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. The protesters charged. Murphy moved with inhuman speed, disarming the first attacker with a swift strike. He dodged a swinging club, using the attacker's momentum to throw him into his companions. In seconds, the human had incapacitated half the group without causing serious harm. Theros watched in awe as Murphy's training kicked in. He was a blur of controlled movement, neutralizing threats with precision and efficiency. As quickly as it began, the skirmish was over. The remaining protesters fled, leaving their unconscious comrades behind. Murphy turned to Theros, concern etched on his face. "Are you all right, Ambassador?" She nodded, unable to find words. His proximity sent a shiver through her body, a sensation both alien and exhilarating. As security forces arrived to handle the aftermath, Theros made a decision. "Sergeant, I believe we should continue our discussion in a more private setting. My office isn't far from here." Murphy raised an eyebrow but nodded in agreement. In the following days, Theros found herself arranging a series of cultural exchange meetings with the human soldier. Each encounter left her more fascinated by Earth and its inhabitants. She learned of human customs, their history, their dreams of exploring the stars. During one such meeting, Theros' curiosity got the better of her. "Sergeant, I hope you don't find this inappropriate, but I'm quite interested in human physiology. Your species is so different from ours." Murphy's lips quirked in a small smile. "What would you like to know, Ambassador?" Theros felt her scales flush with warmth. "Well, for instance, how do humans, mate for procreation and pleasure?" The human's eyes widened slightly, but he maintained his composure. "That's quite a complex topic, Ambassador. Perhaps we should start with something simpler, like our dietary habits." Their conversation was interrupted by a furious pounding on the door. Zelik burst in, his scales flaring with rage. "Traitor!" he hissed at Theros. "You dishonor me, our marriage, our entire species by consorting with this alien." News of Zelik's accusation spread through Zindi society like wildfire. Theros found herself standing before the High Council, defending her actions. "Esteemed counselors," she began, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil, "my meetings with Sergeant Murphy have been purely diplomatic in nature. We seek to bridge the gap between our peoples to ensure lasting peace." The council chamber buzzed with whispers and clicking mandibles. Theros could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her. As tensions rose, Earth dispatched Ambassador Elena Rodriguez to Zindus. The human diplomat, known for her skill in navigating interspecies conflicts, wasted no time in arranging a meeting between all parties involved. Theros, Murphy, Zelek, and Rodriguez gathered in a small conference room. The air crackled with unspoken hostility. "Let's address the underlying issues here," Rodriguez began, her tone firm but neutral. "We all want what's best for our respective peoples. How can we move forward productively?" Zelek's mandibles clicked furiously. "There is no moving forward. These humans are a threat to our way of life. And you," he turned to Theros, "you betray everything we stand for." Without warning, Zelek lunged at Murphy. The human reacted instantly, sidestepping the attack and using Zelek's momentum to pin him against the wall. Murphy held him there effortlessly, not applying pressure, simply restraining. "That's enough," Murphy said calmly. "We're here to talk, not fight." The incident, witnessed by Rodriguez and several Zindi officials, marked a turning point. Murphy's restraint in the face of provocation impressed many Zindi citizens. Public opinion began to shift, with more voices calling for increased cooperation with humans. Seizing the opportunity, Rodriguez proposed a series of public events to foster understanding between their species. Theros eagerly supported the initiative, seeing it as a chance to repair her political standing and satisfy her growing curiosity about humans. As preparations began, Theros found herself working closely with Murphy. They spent long hours planning demonstrations of human customs, discussing which aspects of Earth culture might resonate with Zindi sensibilities. One evening, as they pored over event schedules, Theros noticed Murphy stifling a yawn. "You seem tired, Sergeant," she said, concern coloring her voice. Murphy smiled ruefully. "Just adjusting to the longer Zindi day. Nothing to worry about." Theros felt a surge of warmth at his dedication. She reached out, hesitantly placing a hand on his arm. "Your efforts are appreciated, Roger, more than you know." The use of his first name hung in the air between them. Murphy's eyes met hers, and for a moment the universe seemed to shrink to just the two of them. The moment was broken by a chime from Murphy's comm device. He cleared his throat, stepping back. "We should, get back to work. Lots to do before the first event." Theros nodded, her mind racing. She knew she stood at a crossroads, her personal feelings at odds with her duty to her people. As she watched Murphy return to the task at hand, she realized the decisions she made in the coming days would shape not only her future, but the future of human-Xindi relations for generations to come. As the days passed, Theros found herself increasingly drawn to Sergeant Roger Murphy. Their frequent interactions during planning sessions for the cultural exchange events sparked a connection that went beyond mere professional courtesy. Despite her best efforts to maintain boundaries, Theros couldn't deny the growing warmth she felt in Murphy's presence. Meanwhile, Zelik's behavior continued to deteriorate. His public outbursts became more frequent and volatile, eroding his standing among the Xindi populace. At a council meeting, he interrupted proceedings with a tirade against human influence, causing several members to openly question his fitness for office. The day of the first major cultural exchange event arrived, bathing the central plaza of the Xindi capital in the golden light of the twin suns. Murphy and his team had spent weeks preparing, and now they stood ready to showcase human customs to the gathered crowd. Theros watched from a raised platform as Murphy demonstrated Earth's social greetings. He shook hands with volunteers from the audience, eliciting chittering laughter from the Xindi as they attempted to mimic the unfamiliar gesture. Next came a presentation of Earth cuisine, with Murphy explaining the concept of cooking food as opposed to the Xindi practice of consuming raw nutrients. But it was the final demonstration that truly captured the crowd's attention. Murphy took center stage, his muscular frame tensed in anticipation. "And now," he announced, his voice carrying across the plaza, "I'll show you some techniques from Earth's martial arts traditions." What followed left the audience breathless. Murphy moved with fluid grace, his body a whirlwind of controlled power. He executed a series of kicks, punches, and acrobatic maneuvers that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The Xindi watched in awe as Murphy demonstrated moves designed to disarm and incapacitate opponents without causing permanent harm. As the demonstration concluded, the plaza erupted in a chorus of clicks and whistles, the Xindi equivalent of applause. Theros felt her heart racing, impressed by the display of strength and precision she had just witnessed. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Theros approached Murphy. "Sergeant, your demonstration was enlightening," she said, her scales shimmering with hardly restrained excitement. "I wonder if you might be willing to provide some private instruction in these techniques? For diplomatic purposes, of course, to better understand Earth's military capabilities." Murphy raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Of course, Ambassador. I'd be happy to arrange some training sessions." And so began their clandestine meetings at a secluded training facility on the outskirts of the city. As they sparred, Theros became acutely aware of the physical differences between their species. Murphy's muscular physique, honed by Earth's stronger gravity, contrasted sharply with the lithe, delicate forms of Xindi males. During one session, as Murphy demonstrated a grappling technique, Theros found herself both thrilled and terrified by their close proximity. The sensation of his skin against her scales sent shivers through her body, a feeling entirely foreign to Xindi customs. Distracted by these new sensations, Theros misjudged a defensive move. Murphy's hand caught her arm, his blunt human nails leaving a small cut on her scaled skin. He immediately released her, concern etched on his face. "I'm so sorry, Ambassador," he said, reaching for a first aid kit. "Let me take care of that." As Murphy tended to her wound, Theros felt overwhelmed by his nearness, the gentle touch of his hands. In a moment of vulnerability, words spilled from her mouth before she could stop them. "Sergeant Roger, I find myself experiencing unfamiliar emotions in your presence. Is this normal for humans?" Murphy's hands stilled, his eyes meeting hers. "What you're describing sounds like attraction, Ambassador. It's a common experience for humans when they develop feelings for someone." Theros' scales flushed with warmth. "Feelings? You mean mating instincts?" Murphy chuckled softly. "Not exactly. Human relationships involve emotional connections as well as physical ones. We express affection through various means, like kissing." "Kissing?" Theros tilted her head, curiosity piqued. "What is that?" Murphy hesitated, then explained the concept. Theros listened with a mixture of fascination and revulsion. The idea of pressing mouths together seemed alien and potentially dangerous. Yet her curiosity won out over her apprehension. "Could you demonstrate?" she asked hesitantly. Murphy's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you sure, Ambassador? I wouldn't want to overstep any boundaries." Theros nodded, her heart's pounding. "I'm sure, for scientific purposes, of course." Slowly, Murphy leaned in. His lips brushed against hers, soft and warm. Theros froze, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar sensation. After a brief moment, she pulled away, her legs shaking. "That was interesting," she said, her voice shaky. Despite her initial shock, Theros found herself wanting to explore this strange human custom further. As they continued their training sessions, neither aware of the storm brewing around them, Zelek, consumed by rage and jealousy, had been monitoring their interactions. He saw the growing closeness between Theros and Murphy as the ultimate betrayal, not just of their marriage, but of the entire Xindi race. In the shadows of the capital, Zelek made contact with a group of anti-human extremists. Together, they began plotting a terrorist attack on the next cultural exchange event. Zelek's plan was simple and brutal: unleash violence on the unsuspecting crowd and frame Murphy and the human delegation for the atrocity. As the day of the next event approached, tensions in the capital reached a fever pitch. Rumors of Theros and Murphy's affair had spread, dividing Xindi society. Some saw their relationship as a symbol of hope for closer ties with humans, while others viewed it as a threat to Xindi culture and values. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez, sensing the delicate nature of the situation, requested a private meeting with Murphy. In her temporary office at the Xindi Diplomatic Center, she fixed him with a stern gaze. "Sergeant, I hope you understand the precarious position we're in," Rodriguez said, her voice low and urgent. "Your involvement with Ambassador Theros has not gone unnoticed. I need you to consider the broader implications of your actions. The entire military exchange program could be at risk." Murphy nodded, his expression grave. "I understand, Ambassador, but I can't simply ignore my feelings for Theros. There has to be a way forward that doesn't jeopardize our mission or the peace between our species." As Murphy left the meeting, his mind racing with conflicting thoughts, he failed to notice a figure slipping away from the shadows near Rodriguez's office. Zelek smiled to himself, his mandibles clicking softly. The human's admission had given him all the justification he needed. With the next cultural exchange event just days away, Zelek finalized his plans for the attack. He arranged for weapons to be smuggled into the venue, coordinating with his extremist allies to ensure maximum chaos and destruction. Theros, oblivious to the looming danger, struggled with her own internal conflict. Her feelings for Murphy had grown deeper, but she couldn't ignore the potential consequences of their relationship. As she prepared for the upcoming event, she tenacity to speak with Murphy and find a way to address their situation openly. Murphy, however, had begun to sense that something was amiss. Years of military training had honed his instincts, and Zelek's recent behavior had raised red flags. In the hours before the event, Murphy decided to investigate, following a hunch that led him to Zelek's private communications. What he discovered chilled him to the bone: encrypted messages, weapons schematics, and a detailed plan for an attack on the cultural exchange event. Murphy knew he had to act fast to prevent a catastrophe that could shatter the fragile peace between humans and Xindi. As the twin suns of Xindus began to set, casting long shadows across the capital, Murphy raced against time to gather evidence and alert the authorities. Theros, unaware of the impending danger, made her way to the event venue, her mind focused on the conversation she needed to have with Murphy. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the future of human-Xindi relations. With Zelek's attack looming and emotions running high, the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. As the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the Xindi capital, Theros made her final preparations for the upcoming cultural exchange event. Her heart raced with a mixture of anticipation and dread, knowing that she would soon have to confront both her husband, Zelek, and Sergeant Murphy. The event venue bustled with activity as Xindi and human delegates arrived. Theros stood at the entrance, her scales shimmering with nervous energy. She spotted Zelik approaching, his mandibles twitching with nearly unleashed agitation. "My dear," Zelik said, his voice strained, "I'm pleased you've decided to attend with me. We must present a united front for our people." Theros nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course, Zelik, we have a duty to uphold." As they entered the grand hall, Theros scanned the crowd for Murphy. She caught sight of him near the stage, his brow furrowed in concentration as he spoke urgently into his comm device. Their eyes met briefly, and Theros felt a jolt of electricity course through her body. The event began with a series of speeches from both human and Xindi dignitaries. Ambassador Rodriguez took the stage, her voice echoing through the hall as she spoke of unity and cooperation. Theros noticed Murphy slipping away from the crowd, his movements purposeful and alert. "Zelik," Theros whispered, "is everything all right? You seem unsettled." Her husband's eyes darted around the room. "Everything is fine," he hissed. "Just watch the proceedings." As the speeches continued, Murphy moved along the perimeter of the hall, his hands running along the walls and under tables. Theros watched him with growing concern, her instincts telling her something was terribly wrong. Suddenly, Zelik gripped Theros' arm, his claws digging into her scales. "We need to leave," he growled, pulling her towards the exit. "Zelik, stop!" Theros protested, wrenching her arm free. "What's going on?" His composure cracking, Zelik's voice rose to a shout. "I'm saving our people from human corruption. This ends today." The hall fell silent, all eyes turning to the pair. Theros' blood ran cold as realization dawned. "What have you done?" she whispered. Zelik's eyes blazed with manic intensity. "I've planted explosives throughout the building. Soon the humans will be nothing but a memory, and the Xindi will be free from their influence." Gasps and cries of alarm rippled through the crowd. Theros' mind raced, searching for a way to prevent the impending catastrophe. She caught sight of Murphy across the room, his face a mask of grit as he worked to disarm a device hidden behind a decorative panel. "Security!" Theros called out, her voice carrying across the hall. "Detain Zelik immediately. He's responsible for planting explosives in the building." Chaos erupted as Xindi security forces converged on Zelik. He struggled against them, his mandibles clicking furiously. "You've betrayed your own kind, Theros," he spat. "For what? A human?" Theros ignored his words, pushing through the panicking crowd towards Murphy. She reached him just as he finished disarming one of the devices. "Sergeant," she said, her voice urgent, "how can I help?" Murphy looked up, surprise and relief flooding his features. "Ambassador, I need your knowledge of Xindi architecture. There are more devices hidden throughout the building. We need to find them fast." Together, they raced through the venue, Theros guiding Murphy to potential hiding spots. As they worked, Theros marveled at Murphy's steady hands and quick thinking. His strength allowed him to access areas she couldn't, while her familiarity with Xindi design proved invaluable in locating the explosives. Time seemed to stretch as they located and disarmed device after device. Sweat beaded on Murphy's brow, and Theros' scales pulsed with exertion. They moved in perfect synchronization, communicating with glances and brief touches. As they approached the final device, a commotion near the main entrance caught their attention. Zelik had broken free from his captors and was racing towards a control panel on the wall. "No!" Theros cried out, realizing his intent. Murphy reacted instantly, launching himself across the room. He collided with Zelik just as the Xindi's hand reached for the detonator. They grappled on the floor, a tangle of human limbs and Xindi appendages. Theros rushed to help, but Ambassador Rodriguez beat her to it. The human diplomat grabbed a heavy vase from a nearby table and brought it down on Zelik's head with a resounding crack. Zelik went limp, and Murphy scrambled to his feet. "Nice swing, Ambassador," Murphy said, breathing heavily. Rodriguez nodded grimly. "I've wanted to do that since our first negotiation session." As Xindi security forces took Zelik into custody, Theros approached Murphy. Her heart pounded as she met his gaze. "Sergeant Roger," she began, her voice soft. "I don't know how to thank you. You've saved countless lives today." Murphy's eyes softened. "I couldn't have done it without you, Theros. We make a good team." The gravity of the situation settled over the hall, As the full extent of Zelek's plot became clear, Theros found herself at the center of attention, Xindi and humans alike looking to her for guidance in the aftermath of the crisis. Ambassador Rodriguez approached, her expression thoughtful. Ambassador Theros, I believe this incident has demonstrated the need for even closer cooperation between our species. I have a proposal, if you're willing to hear it. Theros nodded, acutely aware of Murphy's presence beside her. As Rodriguez outlined her plan for an extended cultural exchange program on Earth, Theros felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The opportunity to learn more about humans and to explore her feelings for Murphy was both thrilling and terrifying. I accept, Theros said, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. For the sake of both our peoples, I will go to Earth. As preparations for her journey began, Theros found herself in a whirlwind of activity. She barely had time to process the end of her marriage or the radical shift in the Xindi-human relations. Through it all, Murphy remained a constant presence, now officially assigned as her security detail and cultural liaison. The day of departure arrived all too quickly. As Theros boarded the ship that would take her to Earth, she cast one last look at the Xindi capital. The twin suns rose over the horizon, bathing the city in golden light. It was a new dawn, not just for her, but for all Xindi. Murphy appeared at her side, his hand hovering near her arm. Ready for your next adventure, Ambassador? Theros took a deep breath, her scales shimmering with anticipation. As ready as I'll ever be, Sergeant. As the ship's engines hummed to life, Theros steeled herself for the unknown. Earth, with all its wonders and challenges, awaited. And beside her stood Murphy, a bridge between two worlds and a promise of something more. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Theros felt truly alive. As the ship's engines hummed to life, Theros steeled herself for the unknown. Earth, with all its wonders and challenges, awaited. And beside her stood Murphy, a bridge between two worlds and a promise of something more. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Theros felt truly exhilarated by the possibilities. The descent through Earth's atmosphere was smooth, but as soon as Theros stepped off the landing platform, she felt the full force of the planet's gravity. Her legs buckled slightly, and she stumbled forward. Murphy's hand shot out, steadying her. "Easy there, Ambassador," he said, concern etched on his face. "It'll take some time to adjust to Earth gravity." Theros nodded, her breath coming in short gasps. "Thank you, Sergeant. I hadn't expected it to be quite so intense." As they made their way through the spaceport, Theros' eyes widened at the bustling crowds and towering structures. The sheer number of humans moving about was overwhelming, their voices a cacophony of unfamiliar sounds. Murphy guided her to a waiting vehicle, his hand hovering near her back, ready to catch her if she stumbled again. "We'll head straight to your quarters," he explained as they settled into the back seat. "It's been specially designed to help you acclimatize." The drive through the city was a blur of lights, sounds, and motion. Theros pressed her face against the window, drinking in the sights of her new home. Towering skyscrapers reached towards the sky, their gleaming surfaces reflecting the setting sun. Vehicles of all shapes and sizes zipped through the air and along the ground, creating a dizzying dance of movement. When they finally arrived at the diplomatic compound, Theros felt a wave of relief wash over her. The compound was a stark contrast to the chaotic city beyond its walls. Quiet, orderly, and filled with familiar faces from the human delegation she'd met on Xindus. Ambassador Rodriguez was waiting for them at the entrance. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador Theros," she said warmly. "I trust your journey was comfortable." Theros inclined her head in greeting. "It was enlightening, Ambassador Rodriguez. Thank you for your hospitality." As they walked through the compound, Rodriguez explained the various accommodations that had been made for Theros' comfort. "Your living quarters have been outfitted with gravity regulators to ease your transition. We've also adjusted the atmospheric composition to more closely match that of Xindus." Murphy added, "I'll be staying in the adjoining suite. If you need anything at all, day or night, just let me know." Theros felt a flutter in her heart at his words, but quickly pushed the feeling aside. This was no time for such distractions. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. True to her role as cultural liaison, Murphy accompanied Theros on a tour of Earth's most significant landmarks and cities. They visited the sprawling megapolis of New York, the artistic wonders of Paris, and the ancient ruins of Rome. During a quiet moment at the Taj Mahal, Theros found herself captivated not by the magnificent structure before her, but by the play of sunlight on Murphy's face. He turned, catching her gaze, and smiled. "What do you think?" he asked, gesturing to the marble dome. Theros felt her scales flush with warmth. "It's beautiful," she said softly, not entirely sure if she was referring to the monument or the man beside her. As they continued their journey, Theros found herself growing more comfortable with Earth customs and with Murphy's presence. She marveled at his strength as he helped her navigate the higher gravity, and she admired his patience as he explained countless human idiosyncrasies. One evening, after a long day of tours and meetings, Theros returned to her quarters, exhausted but exhilarated. She called out to Murphy, wanting to share her thoughts on the day's events, and walked into the shared living space without waiting for a response. The sight that greeted her stopped her in her tracks. Murphy stood with his back to her, his uniform shirt discarded on a nearby chair. His bare human skin gleamed in the soft light, muscles rippling as he reached for a clean shirt. Theros froze, her mind blown. In all their time together, she had never seen Murphy, or any human, in such a state of undress. The alienness of his form, so different from Zindi physiology, sent a jolt of panic through her system. Without thinking, Theros turned and fled the room, her heart's pounding. She could hear Murphy calling after her, confusion and concern in his voice, but she didn't stop until she reached the safety of her private chamber. As she leaned against the closed door, trying to calm her racing pulse, Theros realized the magnitude of her reaction. How could she hope to bridge the gap between their species if she couldn't even handle the sight of human skin? The next morning, a subdued Theros met with Ambassador Rodriguez to discuss the incident. Rodriguez listened with understanding and immediately suggested a solution. "I think it would be beneficial for you to speak with Dr. Eliza Bailey," Rodriguez said gently. "She's a xenobiologist who specializes in interspecies relations. She can help you understand human physiology from a scientific perspective." Theros agreed, eager to overcome her unexpected aversion. Dr. Bailey proved to be a patient and thorough teacher, using clinical terms and detailed anatomical models to explain human biology. "You see, Ambassador," Dr. Bailey said, pointing to a holographic display, "human reproduction and Zindi reproduction share many fundamental similarities, despite the obvious physical differences." As the session progressed, Theros found her scientific curiosity overriding her initial discomfort. She asked questions, took notes, and gradually began to see human physiology in a new light. However, as she left Dr. Bailey's office, Theros realized that understanding human anatomy intellectually was one thing. Being comfortable with it emotionally was quite another. The thought of physical intimacy with a human, with Murphy, still sent a tremor of apprehension through her. As Theros grappled with these new challenges, tensions were rising both on Earth and on Sindus. News of her extended stay and growing comfort with human customs had reached her homeworld, sparking protests from conservative factions who feared she was being corrupted by human influence. On Earth, a group of anti-alien extremists had begun staging increasingly violent demonstrations against the Zindi presence. The situation came to a head one evening as Theros and Murphy were returning from a diplomatic function. As their vehicle approached the compound, they saw a crowd of angry protesters blocking the entrance. Signs bearing xenophobic slogans bobbed above the sea of faces, and chants filled the air with hostility. Murphy's expression hardened as he assessed the situation. "This doesn't look good," he muttered, reaching for his comm device. "Control, we have a situation at the main gate, requesting immediate backup." Before Theros could respond, a loud explosion rocked the vehicle. The protesters had breached the outer defenses of the compound. Chaos erupted as security forces rushed to contain the situation. "We need to get you to safety," Murphy said, his voice steady despite the urgency of the moment. He grabbed Theros' hand, pulling her from the vehicle and towards a side entrance of the compound. As they raced through the corridors, alarms blaring around them, Theros felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. Despite the danger, she couldn't help but feel secure with Murphy by her side. Suddenly, a second explosion shook the building, and the lights flickered out. In the darkness, Theros heard Murphy curse under his breath. "Change of plans," he said, his grip on her hand tightening. "We need to find a secure room and wait for backup." They stumbled through the darkened hallways, the sounds of the riot growing louder. Finally, Murphy pulled Theros into a small, windowless room and secured the door behind them. "We should be safe here for now," he said, his breath coming in short pants. "But we need to be ready to move if—" His words were cut off by the sound of pounding footsteps in the hallway outside. Angry voices drew closer, and the door handle rattled violently. Theros felt her heart racing as she realized the gravity of their situation. Trapped in a small space with Murphy, facing an unknown threat, she was forced to confront not only the danger outside, but also her own conflicted feelings. As the extremists began to breach the room's defenses, Murphy's eyes met Theros's in the dim emergency lighting. In that moment, despite their physiological differences and the chaos surrounding them, Theros saw something in his gaze that transcended species, a promise of protection, of trust, and perhaps something more. The door groaned under the assault from outside, and Murphy sprang into action. "There's an emergency exit behind that panel," he said, pointing to the far wall. "It's going to be a tight squeeze, but it's our only option." As Murphy worked to open the hidden passage, Theros steeled herself for what was to come. She knew that escaping would require close physical contact with Murphy, something that both terrified and, she realized with surprise, excited her. The door behind them began to splinter, and Murphy turned to Theros with urgency in his eyes. "Are you ready?" he asked, extending his hand. Theros took a deep breath, her scales shimmering with nervous energy. She reached out and grasped Murphy's hand, feeling the alien warmth of his skin against hers. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. As they prepared to enter the narrow passage, leaving the chaos behind them, Theros realized that this moment marked more than just a physical escape. It was the beginning of a new chapter in her understanding of humans, of Murphy, and of herself. As they squeezed through the narrow passage, Theros felt Murphy's body heat radiating through his uniform, a stark reminder of their physiological differences. The next few hours passed in a blur of chaos and confusion. Security forces eventually secured the compound, but the damage had been done. The attack had shaken the fragile peace between humans and Xindi, and both Ambassador Rodriguez and her superiors agreed that more drastic measures were necessary to ensure Theros' safety. 2 days later, Theros found herself aboard a high-speed transport racing across the North American continent. Murphy sat beside her, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings for potential threats. "Where exactly are we going?" Theros asked, her scales shifting in a pattern that reflected her unease. Murphy's expression softened as he turned to her. "A secure facility in a remote area. It's surrounded by dense forests and mountains, which should make it much harder for any extremist to reach us." As the transport descended, Theros gasped at the vista before her. Endless green stretched in every direction, broken only by the jagged peaks of distant mountains. The facility itself was a low, sprawling structure that blended seamlessly into the landscape. Over the next few weeks, Theros found herself settling into a new routine. The isolated location provided a welcome respite from the constant scrutiny she had faced in the city. Here, she could continue her cultural exchange program in peace, with Murphy as her constant companion and guide. One evening, as they sat in the facility's lounge watching the sunset over the mountains, Theros turned to Murphy with a question that had been gnawing at her. "Sergeant," she began, then paused, searching for the right words. "I was wondering if I could learn more about human physiology. In more detail, I mean." Murphy's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "Of course, Ambassador. I'll ask Dr. Bailey to provide some additional resources." The next day, Theros found herself immersed in a series of educational videos and interactive holographic displays. Dr. Bailey's voice guided her through the intricacies of human anatomy, reproduction, and even physical intimacy. Theros felt her scales flush with warmth as she watched the clinical, yet detailed explanations of human mating practices. As the days passed, Theros found her fear of human physiology gradually being replaced by fascination. She caught herself stealing glances at Murphy when he wasn't looking, her scientific curiosity mixing with something else she couldn't quite name. Meanwhile, Murphy received regular updates from Ambassador Rodriguez on the political situation. The attack on the compound had sparked a fierce debate both on Earth and Zindus. Rodriguez was working tirelessly to mitigate the fallout, arranging a series of public appearances for Theros to showcase the positive aspects of human-Zindi cooperation. One afternoon, as Theros and Murphy were hiking through the surrounding wilderness, the sky suddenly darkened. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and fat raindrops began to fall. "We need to find shelter," Murphy said, grabbing Theros' hand instinctively. "There's a cave system nearby. We can wait out the storm there." They raced through the forest, the rain now coming down in sheets. By the time they reached the cave, both were soaked to the skin. The cave entrance was narrow, forcing them to press close together as they squeezed inside. In the dim light, Theros became acutely aware of Murphy's presence. His wet clothes clung to his body, highlighting the alien contours of his musculature. She felt her heart's racing, but this time, it wasn't from fear. "Are you all right?" Murphy asked, his voice low and concerned. Theros nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As they huddled together for warmth, she found herself leaning into his touch, her initial apprehension melting away like the raindrops on her scales. Hours passed as they waited out the storm, talking in hushed voices about their respective worlds. As the conversation lulled, Murphy cleared his throat nervously. "Theros," he said, using her name for the first time, "there's something I've been wanting to explain to you. It's a human custom called kissing." Theros tilted her head, curiosity overriding her nervousness. "Kissing?" Murphy explained the concept, his words painting a picture of physical affection that both intrigued and intimidated Theros. When he finished, he looked at her questioningly. "Would you like to try it?" he asked softly. Theros hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I think I would." Their first attempt was awkward, their physiological differences making the act challenging. But as they persevered, Theros found herself lost in the sensation. The warmth of Murphy's lips, the gentle pressure, the intimacy of the act. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. As they parted, both slightly breathless, Theros felt a shift in her understanding of human affection. What had once seemed alien and frightening now felt natural, even beautiful. Their moment was interrupted by the harsh buzz of Murphy's communicator. He answered it, his expression growing grave as he listened. "It's Ambassador Rodriguez," he said, turning to Theros. "The Sindi government has issued an ultimatum. They're demanding your immediate return to Sindus, or they'll consider it an act of human aggression." Theros felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath her. The reality of her situation came crashing back, forcing her to confront the choice she now faced. Her duty to her people, or her growing feelings for Murphy, and the new understanding she had gained of humanity. As they prepared to leave the cave, the storm now passed. Theros knew that the journey ahead would be far more challenging than any she had faced before. The fate of two worlds rested on her decision, and time was running out. Theros stood at the window of the secure facility, her scales shimmering with anxiety as she contemplated the ultimatum from the Zindi government. Murphy approached, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. She turned to face him, her alien eyes meeting his human ones. "I'm thinking about everything I've learned here, about humans, about you. I can't simply abandon this mission, not when we've made such progress." With sudden drive, Theros activated the communication panel. "Connect me to Ambassador Rodriguez," she requested. Moments later, Rodriguez's face appeared on the screen. "Ambassador Theros, I was just about to contact you regarding the situation." "I've made my decision," Theros interrupted, her voice steady. "I'm staying on Earth." Rodriguez's eyes widened. "Are you certain? The implications—" "I understand the consequences," Theros said, "but I believe this is the best course of action for both our species. We need to show that deeper understanding is possible." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Theros drafted a public statement with Rodriguez's help, while Murphy coordinated with security teams to prepare for the inevitable backlash. As Theros delivered her announcement to the world, Murphy watched the reactions flood in on various news feeds. The Xindi High Council immediately denounced her decision, while human responses ranged from supportive to outright hostile. Ambassador Rodriguez arrived at the facility the following day, her expression grave. "The situation is deteriorating rapidly," she informed them. "We need to take drastic action to salvage this alliance." She outlined her proposal for a public human bonding ceremony between Theros and Murphy. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Murphy turned to Theros, his face a mix of concern and something deeper. "This is your decision," he said softly. "I'm with you, whatever you choose." Theros felt her heart racing. The idea of a human marriage both thrilled and terrified her. She thought back to their moment in the cave, the kiss they had shared. "I need time to consider this," she said finally. Over the next few days, Theros engaged in lengthy discussions with Murphy and Dr. Bailey. The doctor provided detailed information about human marriage customs and the expectations of physical intimacy. "Remember," Dr. Bailey emphasized, "this union would be more than just a political move. It would require a genuine commitment from both of you." As they prepared to relocate to a more secure military base, Theros made her decision. "I'll do it," she told Murphy, her scales rippling with a mix of nervousness and excitement. "I believe in what we're doing here, and I care for you, Murphy." The announcement of their impending marriage sent shockwaves through both Earth and Xindus. As they settled into the military base, reports came in of violent protests erupting in major cities. "Zelek is leading the opposition on Xindus," Rodriguez informed them during a secure briefing. "He's demanding your extradition, Theros." Theros felt a chill run through her at the mention of her former husband's name. Murphy squeezed her hand reassuringly. As the ceremony approached, security measures intensified. The decision to broadcast the event live across both worlds added an extra layer of pressure. Theros spent hours each day with Dr. Bailey, working through her anxiety about human physical intimacy. The doctor's patience and detailed explanations helped ease her fears, but a knot of apprehension remained in her stomach. The day of the ceremony arrived. As Theros donned her ceremonial robes, modified to accommodate her alien physiology, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her scales shimmered with iridescent colors, reflecting her swirling emotions. Murphy appeared at the door, resplendent in his dress uniform. "Ready?" he asked, extending his hand. Theros took a deep breath and grasped his hand. "Ready," she replied. They made their way to the shuttle that would take them to the orbiting space station. As they ascended through Earth's atmosphere, Theros gazed out the window at the blue planet below, marveling at how it had become her second home. The space station was a hive of activity, with dignitaries from both species mingling in an atmosphere of tense anticipation. As Theros and Murphy took their positions for the ceremony, billions of viewers across two worlds tuned in. The human officiator began the ceremony, his words weaving together traditions from both species. Theros felt as if she were in a dream, the gravity of the moment almost overwhelming. Suddenly, alarms blared through the station. Murphy's comm device crackled to life. "Security breach in life support," a voice shouted. "Xindi extremist?" Murphy's training kicked in instantly. "Continue the ceremony," he ordered, then turned to Theros. "I have to go. Trust me." As Murphy raced off with the security team, Theros stood her ground, determined to see the ceremony through. The officiator, to his credit, continued without missing a beat. Minutes stretched like hours as Theros exchanged vows with an absent Murphy, her eyes constantly darting to the door. Finally, just as the ceremony reached its climax, Murphy reappeared, slightly disheveled but victorious. "Crisis averted," he whispered as he rejoined her. The officiator's voice rose. "I now pronounce you bonded in the eyes of both humanity and the Xindi people. You may seal your union with a kiss." Theros felt a moment of panic, but as she looked into Murphy's eyes, she saw only warmth and acceptance. Their lips met, and for a moment the rest of the universe faded away. The kiss, broadcast across two worlds, caused an immediate sensation. Theros could almost feel the shockwaves rippling through space as they parted. As the ceremony concluded, Theros and Murphy were escorted to a private chamber on the station. The door closed behind them, leaving them alone for the first time as a married couple. Murphy turned to Theros, his expression a mix of love and concern. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. Theros nodded, her scales shimmering with a new pattern, one of anticipation rather than fear. "I'm ready," she said softly, reaching for him. As they began to explore this new dimension of their relationship, Theros found her remaining apprehension melting away. The differences in their physiologies, once a source of anxiety, now became an exciting new frontier to discover together. Later, as they lay entwined, Theros marveled at how far she had come. What had once seemed impossible now felt natural, even beautiful. Their moment of peace was interrupted by a chime from the communication panel. Ambassador Rodriguez's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mix of relief and excitement. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "Your union has already had a dramatic effect on public opinion. But we have a new situation developing. Several other alien species have reached out, expressing interest in establishing diplomatic relations with Earth." Theros and Murphy exchanged glances, realizing that their journey was nowhere near the end. As symbols of interspecies harmony, they now faced a galaxy of new challenges and opportunities. "We're ready," Theros said, grasping Murphy's hand. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." "Together," Theros finished, her voice filled with commitment. As the weeks passed, Theros and Murphy settled into their new life on Earth. Their highly publicized wedding had captured the imagination of both humans and Xindi, becoming a symbol of hope for interspecies relations. The couple found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of diplomatic meetings, cultural exchange programs, and scientific collaborations. One crisp autumn morning, Theros awoke feeling strangely different. She dismissed it at first, attributing the sensation to the lingering effects of a particularly spicy human dish she had tried the night before. However, as days turned into weeks, the feeling persisted and intensified. During a routine medical checkup with Dr. Bailey, Theros mentioned her symptoms. The doctor's eyes widened as she ran a series of tests, her fingers flying over the holographic interface of her medical scanner. "Theros," Dr. Bailey said, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "I don't quite know how to say this, but you're pregnant." The words hung in the air, shocking Theros into silence. Murphy, who had been holding her hand, nearly fell off his chair. "But that's impossible," Theros finally managed to say, her scales rippling with confusion. "Our species are too different. We were told—" "I know," Dr. Bailey interrupted gently, "but the evidence is clear. You're carrying a human-Xindi hybrid child." The news spread rapidly, sending shockwaves through both Earth and Xindus. Scientists from both worlds clamored for access to Theros, eager to study this biological miracle. Theros and Murphy found themselves at the center of a media storm, their every move scrutinized and debated. As Theros' pregnancy progressed, Dr. Bailey assembled a team of human and Xindi specialists to monitor her condition. The gestation was unlike anything they had ever seen, a unique blend of human and Xindi traits that challenged their understanding of both species' biology. One evening, as Theros and Murphy relaxed in their quarters, a violent explosion rocked the building. Alarms blared as security forces rushed to contain the threat. Ambassador Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom, her tone urgent. "We've intercepted communications from an anti-alien terrorist group," she informed them. "They're targeting Theros. We need to move you to a secure location immediately." Within hours, Theros and Murphy found themselves in a high-security military facility, surrounded by armed guards and cutting-edge defense systems. As they settled into their new temporary home, Murphy held Theros close, his hand resting protectively over her swollen abdomen. "I won't let anything happen to you or our child," he whispered fiercely. Meanwhile, on Xindus, Zelik had resurfaced, rallying his supporters with impassioned speeches. "The child growing within Theros is Xindi," he declared to roaring crowds. "It belongs to our people, not to the humans who have corrupted her." As tensions escalated on both planets, Ambassador Rodriguez presented a bold proposal during a late-night video conference with Theros and Murphy. "We need a neutral ground," she explained, her holographic image flickering slightly. "I suggest we arrange for the birth to take place on an orbital space station. We'll invite representatives from both species to witness the event. It could be a powerful symbol of unity." Theros and Murphy exchanged glances, considering the idea. After a moment of silent communication, they nodded in agreement. The following months were a blur of preparations and medical checkups. As Theros' due date approached, she and Murphy were transported to the orbital station under heavy security. The station buzzed with activity as dignitaries and medical personnel from both worlds arrived. When Theros went into labor, billions across two worlds held their breath. Murphy remained by her side throughout the grueling process, offering words of encouragement and support. Dr. Bailey led the medical team, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension permeating the station. After hours of intense labor, a new cry pierced the air. Dr. Bailey's face broke into a wide smile as she held up the newborn, a perfect blend of human and Xindi features. "Congratulations," she said softly. "You have a healthy baby girl." As Theros cradled her daughter for the first time, she felt an overwhelming surge of love. Murphy leaned in, tears glistening in his eyes as he gently stroked the child's cheek. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "What should we name her?" Theros gazed at their daughter, taking in her iridescent scales and human eyes. "Nova," she said softly. "Her name is Nova." The image of the newborn hybrid child, broadcast across both worlds, had an immediate and profound impact. On Earth, even the most vocal anti-alien groups fell silent in the face of this miracle of life. On Xindus, Zelik watched the broadcast with widening eyes, his purpose crumbling as he saw the living proof of what was possible between their species. In the days that followed, as Theros recovered and bonded with Nova, scientists from both worlds worked tirelessly to study the child's unique physiology. Their collaboration led to groundbreaking discoveries in interspecies medicine, opening up new possibilities for biological compatibility between humans and Xindi. Recognizing the historic significance of this event, the governments of Earth and Xindus jointly announced the establishment of a new diplomatic outpost on the very station where Nova was born. Theros and Murphy were appointed as co-ambassadors, tasked with fostering continued cooperation between their species. Weeks later, Theros stood on the observation deck of the station, Nova cradled in her arms. Murphy joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist as they gazed out at the stars. Around them, a diverse team of human and Xindi diplomats and scientists worked together, their previous differences forgotten in the face of this new frontier. Theros turned to Murphy, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. As they shared a tender kiss, Nova cooed softly between them, a living symbol of the bright future that lay ahead for both their species.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.